This is the meeting of TRPA's Advisory Planning Commission. I'm calling us to order. It's February 11th, 2026. It's 9:34. And like I said, we will go to the roll call to determine our quorum. Over to you, Tracy.
Mr. Oling?
Present.
Carr?
Here.
Mr. Drew?
Good morning.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Present.
Ms. Ferris?
Good morning.
Mr. Ferry?
You've got us, obviously, strange echo. Lots of people. I think should we wait for a second here?
Yeah, Josh, can you come to the room? We've got a looping issue. Testing. Testing. Everybody's speakers are off on all the laptops. There goes.
Yeah.
Did you hear that? It's just this one mic, yeah.
What if I turn mine on? Is it doing it now?
And this one's
I guess I'll keep talking so that we can keep testing this issue.
Run the meeting, Catherine.
I love to talk
Take
into
it over.
microphones.
Who's doing it through Catherine? We can use this one.
Yeah, we can use this one. We'll just carry on with the roll, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. I'm present. You didn't get that one.
Mr. Hill?
Good morning.
Ms. Jacobson?
Here.
Ms. Fiore Wagner?
Here.
Mr. McNamara?
Here.
Ms. Cyber? Ms. Stoller?
Here.
Chief Drennan?
Here.
Mr. Teixeira?
Good morning.
Mr. Hitchcock?
Present.
And Mr. Young? Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Are we feeling okay about the mics? Seems double checks. Okay.
I think pretty medium.
I guess we'll just keep going. Okay, let's do it. Okay, where are we? Let's see. Remote meeting rules of the day. Tracy, when you have a moment, could you help us with that one, please?
For members of the public joining us today to observe the meeting, visit trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, select Advisory Planning Commission meeting, hybrid meeting for today's date. There you'll find a link to the public webinar. To make a comment, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen when the relevant agenda item comes up. If you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. For informational items, public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For action or possible action items, public comment will be taken before the Commission takes any action. To remote APC members, please raise your hand to speak, mute your microphone unless you're speaking, and keep your camera on if you're able. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Appreciate that. I'll move us on to item 2, approval of our agenda. I understand there is a change to our agenda, Mr. Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we would like to pull agenda item 4B.
for a month and we'll bring it back in a month.
Okay, so we'll hear item 4B most likely in March. Okay, with that change, I will approve the agenda approved as it's amended for the record, and I'll move us to item 3, disposition of minutes. We do have a draft set of minutes from our January 14th, 2026 meeting on page 5 of your packet. Any member of the commission wish to comment on the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, go ahead.
Thank you for the record, Steve Teixeira. I've discussed these two items with Tracy this morning. Under members absent, it showed Mr. Drake is absent. I believe that was subsequent to his resignation, so he wasn't absent. And there's at the bottom of page 28, under my comments, the last paragraph on the page, there's a missing word. Mr. Teixeira concluded that he wished to his remarks for the record. So Tracy and Catherine will figure out what that missing word would be.
Go on a hunt. Thank you, Steve. Any other members comments on the minutes? Seeing
If
none.
not, I will make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you,
Second.
Steve. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Garth, for the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And do we have any objections or abstentions?
This is Heather Ferris. I'll abstain. I was not present.
Thank you, Heather.
This is Robert Ehrlich. I was only there for a first portion, so I'll abstain.
Thank you, Robert.
And Mary Fiore Wagner, I will also abstain. I was not present.
Thank you, Mary. Perfect. Okay, I'll move us into the heart of our agenda. This is item 4, our planning matters. So item 4A is a public scoping meeting for an environmental impact statement to analyze the cultivating community, conserving the basin policy recommendations. That is an initiative that aims to address the housing crisis in the Lake Tahoe Basin while maintaining and improving environmental protections. The initiative focuses on updated regional environmental growth management policies to ensure equitable, turning the page, sustainable housing for our residents and our friends and our family and our workers. Information on this item can be found on page 35 of our packets. And we have Mr. Stock here again with us to present on this item. So I'll turn it over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, APC. My name is Jacob Stock, Senior Planner with TRPA, and I'm here this morning to talk to you about how you can save money by bundling your home and auto insurance. Shoot, I'm sorry. That's the wrong presentation. Here we go. Let's start over. Jacob Stock, Senior Planner with TRPA. I'm here to actually talk about a public scoping period for an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for cultivating community, conserving the basin. And so Brendan did a great job of explaining what it is. I'll do it again. It's a program looking at how we can adjust TRPA policy and code to better support housing for our workforce and to maintain and even accelerate attainment of our environmental thresholds in the regional plan. And so the board passed a motion to initiate the EIS based on our project description in January, just last month. That was a really important milestone for the project. Now we're in the public scoping period for that EIS, and we're asking that the APC hold a scoping meeting with members of the APC and members of the public here and online. So I hope that this presentation will lead to a rousing discussion on the scope of the EIS. Next slide, please. Okay, the main points that I'll cover today. What is an environmental impact statement? I'll give a little background on that. What's the scoping period and why does it matter? What's proposed to be studied in this EIS? I'll give an overview of the project description that was approved for study by the governing board last month. How do I submit a comment on the scope of the EIS? I'll get into some options for folks in the public and on APC as well. And then finally, next steps for preparing the environmental impact statement. Next slide. What's an EIS? So an environmental impact statement is our highest level of environmental analysis. It analyzes environmental impacts of a potential action, including alternatives and mitigations to any impacts, any likely impacts. So you can think of the policies analyzed in the EIS in this project description as the envelope or the sandbox of study for possible policy and code changes that could be made through this project. It defines the extent of actions that can be taken on the project. And so we want to study that full extent of actions. Next slide. Okay, so here's a list of more than a dozen areas that will be studied in the EIS. It covers all of our thresholds and it's quite comprehensive here from the start. So you can see, just to name a few things, we're going to look at land use and neighborhood compatibility, growth management, water quality, scenic quality, transportation, public safety, and wildfire and evacuation. So just to name a few of the items that we'll be looking for just by virtue of doing an EIS in the first place. Next slide. But we also have this scoping period, which started last month and lasts through March 16th. So we're kind of in the middle of it right now. And it's an opportunity to add to that list that I showed before, but also to build in detail of what we want to analyze and how we want to analyze it in the EIS. I want to clarify here that this is not an opportunity to change the project proposal. There'll be another opportunity to alter the proposal later in the process after the EIS is complete and before any policy is adopted. With that said, right now is a great time to talk about the environmental impacts that are important to consider in the EIS and how we want to consider them. So we really want to focus the discussion here on environmental impacts. That's where we're at right now in the process. And so that's why the scoping period matters. We'll consider your comments and use your input to shape the scope of the environmental analysis. And what we study and how we study it matters for the project and it matters for the environment. So this is an important phase in the project. Next slide. What's being studied in the EIS? So that's all detailed in attachment A to your packet and summarized in the project description, and attachment B, that's the notice of preparation that was sent out. You had an opportunity to review and comment on the project in December, and we took your comments and we built that into the proposal. And so right now this is going to be a review, but I'm just going to review some of the key points from the project description so that we know, what we're commenting on. Next slide. A reminder that these proposed policies are based on the project goals and outcomes, which the board approved in March, and they're summarized up here in this slide. So at the heart of this project, we tried to craft policy to meet our housing needs while maintaining and improving environmental conservation and preservation. And one way that we're doing that in this proposal is through a tiered incentive structure that gives the highest priority to deed restricted, affordable, and moderate income housing, some lesser incentives for deed restricted achievable housing and what we call affordable by design housing, and then no incentives for market rate single family housing and unrestricted condominiums. So that's just sort of a framework for how we're applying these incentives. And it is really based on some comments that we heard from you all and from the governing board and the public throughout that period when we were commenting on the project. Next slide. Okay, so getting into it, starting with policies to reduce time and cost to build workforce housing. So we'll look in the EIS, we'll look at replenishing our bonus unit pool by removing development rights from the commercial floor area, tourist accommodation unit, and persons at one time pools. Persons at one time, we don't talk about as much. We call them payouts for short. It's a development right that's used for like campsites, recreation facilities. So removing development rights from those pools, converting those into bonus units. And so some of those bonus units would be reserved for affordable by design housing. We're considering maybe about 10%. The majority of them would be for deed restricted housing. We'll also consider a bonus unit conversion ratio that reflects the environmental impact of bonus units compared to other development types. We'll analyze junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs for short, as accessory to a single family home. So a JADU, if you're not familiar with it, is a small apartment, 500 square feet or less, that is within the existing footprint of a single family home. So this proposal would look at not requiring a separate development right for a JADU. We'll look at policies that ensure all new development contributes proportionally to meeting the housing need. Look at scaling development rights using conversion ratios as a basis, and look at scaling TRPA fees to reflect the latest data on impacts and cost of doing business. And then finally, single family homes are currently exempt from TRPA environmental review. It's been that way for some time. We'll look at holding small multifamily housing that meets our housing needs to the same standard, and we want to look at doing the same for deed restricted housing that's built as infill or redevelopment. Next slide. So water quality is the foundation of everything that we do as an agency. This water quality component would update our land coverage and stormwater policies to focus on improving water quality while allowing compact infill housing in appropriate locations, particularly in town centers. The idea here is that we want to ensure multifamily housing doesn't face stricter, more costly water quality treatment requirements than single family housing. And in doing so, we think we can actually improve water quality overall. So for example, we'll analyze allowing more parcel level coverage for multifamily development with the goal of actually seeing less coverage basin wide. Maintenance for stormwater and BMPs are going to be really important here. And so we'll be analyzing new ways to ensure effective monitoring and maintenance of stormwater systems as well. Next slide. Finally, we'll analyze new strategies for increasing housing choice. We'll analyze new zoning for missing middle housing. We want to encourage local governments to unlock their existing housing stock for the local workforce. And so we're looking at incentives to encourage them to do that. We also heard a lot of support from the public and from our advisory groups on setting up a regional housing authority that could coordinate funding and programming for workforce housing. So we'll be looking at that as well. Next slide. So as we get into the scoping discussion, I want to review a few important points about what is an environmental impact statement again. The policies analyzed in the EIS represent the envelope of study for the project. We want to study the impacts of these potential policies, and we can adjust and scale back if needed based on what we find in the analysis later on in the process. So what we're really focused on now is developing the scope of that analysis. And we're asking for impacts on what should and shouldn't be, or what should be considered in the analysis and how it should be considered. And those comments will help us define the scope of the EIS. Next slide. How do you make a comment? Well, one way to make a comment is to participate in the public scoping discussion that we're going to have right after my presentation. But that's not the only way. The best way to make a comment is to send an email to housing@trpa.gov. Written comments can be really useful. Those are due by March 16th for comments on the scope of the EIS. And again, a reminder at this point in the project, we're really only considering comments on the scope of the environmental analysis. There will be more opportunity to comment on the project after the draft EIS is complete. And then for more information on the project, including the project description, you can go to the major projects page at trpa.gov, and the link is up there. That's also where you'll find a scoping summary when the scoping period is wrapped up. So we'll have a summary of all the comments that we received during this period. Next slide. Next steps. The board directed us last month to start the EIS and release the notice of preparation to prepare an EIS. We did that at the end of January. That started the scoping period, which will last for 6 weeks for this project. The typical period is 30 days, but we decided to extend it to 6 weeks to give folks more opportunity. And so that period lasts from January through March 16th, as I noted before. Which brings us to now. We're in the middle of that scoping period. As part of the scoping period, we're asking the APC to host a scoping meeting where APC members and the public can comment on the scope of the EIS. And all of that will be included in a scoping summary report that comes out after the scoping period is closed. And as I mentioned again before, this is by no means the last opportunity to give input. There will be more opportunity for public comment in the summer when we have a draft EIS, and we hope to have a final EIS and policy proposal in the fall and early 2027. So there will be more opportunities for engagement and comment on the project, but right now we're really focusing on what we want to see in the EIS. Next, oh wait, I actually don't think I have any slides. Yeah, so this is the last slide, as it were. So with that as context, yeah, I invite your questions and discussion on the scope of the EIS. We'll be recording your ideas on the scope and including them in that summary report after the period's ended.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. So if he didn't say it enough times, today we're talking about the scope of the EIS and not necessarily the project, but there's lots of opportunities to do that. I believe you said in the early summertime and then again in the fall. So just want to encourage members of the public who might be listening to keep that in mind. And we will now go to APC members, and I think Mr. Teixeira will start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Steve Teixeira. So Jacob, you went pretty quickly through that. And what I missed was the context when you said the cost of doing business. The cost of doing business for whom?
Yeah, so the cost, thank you, Jacob Stock, for the record. We're talking about, or what I was referring to as the cost of, when I said the cost of doing business, I meant the cost for TRPA staff to review to review and issue a permit. And so we have a parallel process going on right now, the permit improvement program, where we have staff that are looking at the cost of time and cost of reviewing different projects and making adjustments to fees to recover that cost.
Okay, I always think about cost of doing business for the people that have to deal with the agency, but I wanted to have you clarify. So thank you for doing so. The other thing I wanted to ask, if I could, Mr. Chairman. So in reading a lot of the public comments and hearing what our colleagues say, there seems to be a lot of concern around the missing middle and the definition of achievable housing and housing for certain income types that isn't, quote, deed restricted. How would the EIS bring clarity to that issue, if it would?
Yeah, Jacob Stock for the record. So what we're proposing to do here is, well, first of all, to answer the question, to start with, of the affordable by design housing. So this is something a little bit new that we're proposing in this project to create a definition that's not necessarily deed restricted, but have some incentives for some housing that's non-deed restricted, but designed for the local workforce. And so the idea behind that is that we haven't seen bonus unit utilization anywhere near what we had expected and hoped for in the 2012 regional plan. And so setting aside this, small pool of bonus units and incentives is, sort of experimenting with, well, can we produce new workforce units without deed restrictions? And there's some cost benefits to doing that. And as far as looking at the cost to subsidize deed restricted housing, which is often a big barrier, especially for middle income projects where we really haven't seen bonus units utilized. So how this could be analyzed, how, you know, the efficacy of that could be analyzed in the environmental impact statement. You know, we're looking at we have William Anderson, who is a expert in housing market analysis, who's doing some work for us on residual land value analysis. So looking at you know how projects pencil out and where the price points end up. So that's sort of beyond the scope of the EIS, but it's part of the project and part of the analysis that we're doing for the project. As far as, you know, environmental impacts of these units, I mean, I'm interested to hear what folks want us to look at, because I don't necessarily know if the environmental impact changes based on whether something is deed restricted or isn't deed restricted. Maybe we'll find that out.
Yeah, and this is Graham St. Michelle, General Counsel. I would just add to try to give a little more on that, Steve, Mr. Teixeira. You know, the environmental impact statement will really be focused on the environmental impacts, potential environmental impacts of the policies that are being studied. And I think you know, staff have been working through the Tahoe Living Working Group for about a year now, probably to really hone in what those policy concepts are. I don't envision the EIS as really getting into the wisdom of the policy recommendations, but more the impacts, the potential impacts. But you might find through that analysis, and it's still an ongoing process to, you know, be thinking about these ideas and what ideas may have more impacts. And so some of that could come out of it. And I think the very last thing I'll just say is, and to maybe jump the gun a little bit on staff, but just to preview, I think we will be coming back to APC to talk about a sort of final tranche of policy ideas, one of which is income limits. And, you know, I think we will have that opportunity in the scoping period to come back, and we want to agendize some of those discussions with you, and you can look forward to that probably next month or April. I can't remember what we said. So
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, if I could finish. So thank you for that, Graham. There's two things. One is I want to make sure that we do a proper job with the EIS and cover it. I also want to make sure that people don't have an unrealistic expectation as to what the EIS can do for us. So thank you.
Agreed. Yeah, environmental impacts, you know, to me, that's, yeah, intensity, traffic, all the things you had on your slide, right, Jacob? I was trying to ponder whether having a deed restriction affects that or not myself. So I don't know if that's a specific question that can be posed to your consultant to try to get to the bottom of, or come up with some sort of an objective answer through the EIS process. But I think you should look at that. It sounds like that's a concern. So let's do that. Any other members in the room want to jump in? Hitch?
Jacob, I was reading through all the comments that were submitted, and there was a lot of discussions about this no growth alternative. My assumption is that there is a no project alternative, correct? Which essentially is still working under the current growth management system in place, which still has a growth component to it. But there seems to be a push, or at least a request, that there's this like no growth alternative, and I'm just would like some feedback from you guys. Is that even an option? Because that would require like some sort of moratorium to basically shut down development for a no growth alternative.
Yeah, Jacob Stock, I would maybe defer to Graham on this one, but we do have a no project alternative as with any EIS. No growth alternative sounds like a regional plan update level,
I think
request.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob, and appreciate the question. I think that we will take that, Mr. Hitchcock, as a scoping comment and consider that as like how that's being framed is teed up as an alternative. I'm not sure that that's the intent to tee it up that way, but but that could be, the way that we're wording a project alternative. I think if I'm, I think that was probably meant a no project, like we weren't going through with these policies rather than something more like a moratorium. I don't think that was the
Yeah,
intent.
it wasn't very clear.
Yeah.
It's basically talk about no growth alternative. You can, that can be interpreted in many, many ways. I think it's something you guys just need to get ahead of and be able to respond to. Thanks.
This is John Hester. I want to add to that. And this kind of goes back to the previous discussion on what does the EIS do and not do. The EIS will identify the environmental impacts, those items Jacob listed, of what we're proposing, and a no project alternative and other alternatives, which are not yet clearly defined, and then identify the mitigation measures based on those impacts. So to give you an example, if we said no growth, as you know, Mr. Hitchcock, that means a mitigation would be somebody comes up with a lot of money to buy a lot of property because there's property rights we can't just take. So that's kind of what will happen. Is there going to be an environmental impact if you deed restrict or don't deed restrict? Don't know. We'll see. If there is, what's the mitigation measure? So that's really where this is going. So for this discussion and for the people listening, they get a good idea of the context.
Yeah, I read that comment as more of no growth beyond what has already been contemplated and approved by the 2012 regional plan, right? Yeah. I was trying to just keep us grounded in the reality of, yes. Garth, would you like to jump in or gonna wait? Okay. Let's go to APC members joining us via Zoom. I see a few hands and I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Young. Go ahead. Computer. All right. How about the other? Let's go with Robert Ehrlich. We'll start there and then we'll come back to you, Eric.
Okay, thanks. There are, under the section that was talking about potential alternatives listed, there is, aside from no project, there is something that's called, there's a partial policy, environmentally focused, housing forward, etc. I was wondering if the partial policy package encompasses ideas that promote housing without increasing population, or coverage or unmitigated coverage. I mean, there's reference to that, a couple options on the partial policy package, but I think some of the comments suggested maybe looking at not increasing the population in the basin by adding maybe the bonus units. And I'm trying to figure if we need to go into more detail about what the partial policy could encompass in order to address some of the comments made by the public.
Yeah, Jacob Stock, I can comment on that. The partial policy as it was written in the notice of preparation is just an outline, and we're really during the scoping period and as we prepare the EIS, we're going to flesh out what that really means. So any comments that we receive on what you think a partial policy alternative could look like, those will be considered.
Is that satisfactory, Mr. Ehrlich?
Um,
Oh, you just muted yourself there.
Well, let's see what comes out of it. Yeah, I'd encourage to kind of looking at some of the comments made. What's the best we can do without, say, increasing more population, which would be, I don't know, kind of looking at how do you use the bonus units or how do you mitigate for that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Young, we'll come back to you.
Thank you very much. Is it working?
We got you.
Great, thank you. The discussion about whether or not deed restricted units are different made me think about the difference between analyzing the impact of these units as they are achieved individually. For instance, what is the impact of achieving one of these bonus units? They're smaller. Where are they going to go? What are the individual impacts at the individual parcel project level versus the impacts of a question such as, what if we're successful? What if these policies work and we get a bunch of these such that we make some dent or movement in the availability of workforce housing, and we end up having more workforce housing here, and therefore some of these broader, larger goals that we constantly talk about regarding how much travel people have to do and community building and so forth. That's a different discussion, right? Based on whether or not an individual unit somehow has an impact. And I think, and maybe this is a question, but don't we need to look at both? Don't we need to look at the impact of allowing these units to proceed as we're suggesting on an individual level, on a parcel-based level? And then don't we also need to look at the impact of saying, what if these policies as a whole are successful policies and we get what we're asking for? So that's my thought. Thank you for listening.
Good thought. Thank you. How about other APC members on Zoom? Ms. Stoller, let's go to you.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chair. I have to admit, I have a lot of questions and thoughts all racing through my head, so I'll try my best to be articulate. But I think I understood that what was being requested of us is, do we have any thoughts on what this EIS should evaluate? And so from my perspective, everything that was presented on that slide, that's excellent. I'm glad that those things are going to be evaluated. I think for me, just contemplating incentivizing kind of the acceleration of the development of workforce housing, affordable housing, et cetera, and incentivizing that in town centers. Of course, evaluating transportation and traffic, impacts to parking, noise, air quality. I think that those would be important to emphasize. And Jacob, your first slide was all about water quality. And I think the devil is in the details there. One thing can affect another. There's, tendency to have parking off street when there's limited parking availability, which has a water quality impact. So anyway, those are my thoughts in terms of the scoping for this EIS.
Thanks, Ellery. Crystal, let's go to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. It looks to me like the items that are to be addressed in the EIS look good from a scoping perspective. So I don't know that I have any comments there. I'm kind of curious to hear what we hear from members of the public in terms of other items that they think need to be analyzed that aren't on that list, because it looks like it's a pretty extensive, thoughtful list of sort of resource areas that need to be analyzed. I would say I am interested in the potential alternative discussion. And in addition to sort of analyzing, what the impacts are if this comes to fruition, right? If this is successful. But also what are the impacts of doing nothing, I think. And that sort of leads to that, maybe not no project alternative, but like that whole discussion that we just had about, no growth, limited growth, right? What are the overall impacts to the lake, to the environment, to just the region in general with doing nothing? So that's it for me.
Thanks, Crystal. I agree. I think that's really important. If we don't do this, what is the future here? And as far as, yeah, remote workers and impacts from commuting and everything else. I think that is really important to look at. Thanks, Crystal. Miss Carr, let's go to you.
Good morning. Thank you. Ellery conveyed quite a number of things that were on my mind, but I'll take it in a slightly different direction because she talked about basically the interconnectedness of different features of environmental impacts, and when those elements are interwebbed, where one, what people can affect noise can affect wildlife can affect outdoor recreation, et cetera. So I know that those interwebbing concepts of the various categories of thresholds and whatnot have been talked about at the Science Advisory Council. So with all that said, my fundamental question is there a role identified for the Tahoe Science Advisory Council to weigh in, to participate, to review this EIS process? Because I think they have another perspective on the interconnectedness of housing and people on everything else. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. We do have some representation there, so maybe we'll hear from them during public comment. Let's see. I see another hand. Miss Cyber, good morning. Let's go to you.
Good morning, everybody. Can folks see me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
we can.
Okay.
Yep.
My little icon didn't come up, so I wasn't sure. Apologies for the late entry here. I'm gonna go off of the comment related to the alternatives. And I know this may be a little bit outside of what you were asking of the group, but I think it's important to think through these things from the beginning. For folks who are not aware, I am a NEPA planner for the Forest Service, so this is, kind of my thing. What I will say is that I think that this type of an EIS, I would be careful with sort of the way that it's framed, like what the overall purpose of it is. And being very, very strategic with the purpose and need. And also the piece of how are we going to decide what alternatives get evaluated? I think that is, at this beginning stage, something that is worth thinking about. And it kind of seems like it comes later, but it's actually better to think about it at this upfront stage and sort of think through what sort of range of alternatives we expect to be kind of asked to work through or to analyze, and how you would have responses as to why you would not, need to consider them. I think that's the thing with EIS is that once you get more than, two alternatives, they start to be, I won't say the word meaningless, but the distinctions between the alternatives start to become meaningless. And so it's important to think through that when you go through your how this gets couched to the public. I'd be, when that comes up, if anybody is interested, I'd be happy to take a look at anything of that. But just putting that out here in the beginning of this project, because these EISs have legs. And that's all. Thank you.
Good comment. Thank you, Ashley. Yep, I think we'll all keep that in mind. For sure. Let's see. I don't see any other yellow hands, do I? Nope. Hitch, let's go to you.
Ask, for the record, John Hitchcock, Jacob, unfortunately, I'm one of the few people who knows what a payout is, and actually I've worked with them. Yeah, and when we use them or not. So my question is, since we're converting payouts into units of use to develop housing, my assumption is that the EIS will analyze the impact of the loss of payouts on the recreation threshold.
Yeah, Jacob Stock for the record. Thanks, John. And actually, as it were, I had a meeting with your wife about just this question yesterday. So you're not the only one who knows about about payouts. But yeah, what we're looking at, analyzing here is the conversion of some overnight payouts to bonus units. And so currently, we haven't been seeing utilization of overnight payouts as expected. And so, yeah, we definitely can look at that in connection to the recreation threshold. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, seems like you certainly have to. Thank you, John. All right, Steve, let's go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Sheriff for the record. Public safety and hazards, including wildfire and evacuation, is one of the things that the EIS will analyze. And I'm reading the description there. And I think, again, I'm trying to get ahead of what people's expectations for this might be and where they see, they could come in at the end and say it's a shortcoming. So I think it would be good to say, or to define, says draft EIS will evaluate potential effects on wildfire risk exposure, evacuation constraints, and related public safety considerations at a programmatic level. How would you define programmatic level?
I would define programmatic level as policy level. So that's, this is a programmatic EIS. We're not analyzing the specific impacts of specific projects. We're analyzing the regional impact of a program.
I appreciate that. I want the record to be clear on that, because I think there's always people, and includes many of us that have been around for a while, that get confused between programmatic level and project level.
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is there's going to be some people wanting project level analysis out of this. And I just want to make sure that expectations are clear. This is programmatic, not project level. Thank you.
Right. Project level analysis comes later, hopefully. Garth, let's go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Jacob, thank you for the presentation, all this discussion. I really think it's important. This kind of goes off of Ellery and Jennifer's comments earlier on the interconnectedness. The cumulative effects analysis oftentimes happens at the end of each section for each one of these impact areas that you're planning on studying. I really think it's important to have potentially a separate chapter of cumulative effects that analyzes everything all together, because a lot of times the analysis is done in direct silos about what their projects and those cumulative effects. But as we know, there's a lot of overlap, and what may be an impact in one area isn't necessarily addressed in another impact area. So I really think it's important to have a really robust, comprehensive, and detailed cumulative effects analysis for this EIS. So thank you.
Good comment, Garth. Thank you. I was just going to weigh in briefly. I mean, to me, and this has been said, but I just want to reinforce it. I think the EIS really needs to take a very careful look at what you're proposing for coverage and what you're proposing for the water quality BMP analysis. It seems like we're going to really try to propose making some changes there, right? Potentially. And I think Ellery said it, the devil's in the details there, running through some real world scenarios on that. What does 100% covered multifamily lot look like? What are soil types looking like in these higher capability lands where these projects are going? Can the BMPs function at that capacity? Feasibility analysis on maintenance over time. I think the EIS is really going to have to test that question, because I think that's going to be continually called out, I think, as a potential criticism of what we're proposing. None of us want to degrade the lake, right? We all live here because of the natural environment. This is really important to us, and I think we can get it right, but I think the EIS needs to be completely bulletproof on that issue, because it's going to get really heavily scrutinized. Got to test coverage. to me that, you know, density, height, yes, that potentially is more units, that's potentially more people, that's potentially more cars. Obviously that analysis is really important, but pushing folks to town centers, pushing folks to transit and other means of mobilizing around our basin, living closer to where they work. I know those are all goals of what we're trying to do. So the EIS obviously needs to test all of those things, see if our assumptions are right. If we build housing, will people live there? Can they afford to live there? Will they live closer to where they work? That's a shorter commute. Playing those scenarios out to me, and I'm not a NEPA planner, but playing those scenarios out to me, it seems really important, critically important. I mean, that's the whole point of why we're doing any of this. So really looking at it at face value and trying to put that analysis out in a real world scenario seems really important to me. Just knowing the things we're going to get pushed on, right? Fire evacuation, we're going to get pushed on. People are going to be very concerned about that. We're probably going to hear about that today. We hear about that often. We really want to test that and look at that. So VMT, yes. Stepping off my soapbox, let's go to Mr. Ehrlich.
Hi again. Yeah, Brendan, I think your comments that suggest that we're looking at changes to coverage and we need to look carefully at the BMPs and also the area-wide BMPs, which do support. There was talk on the maintenance and monitoring of stormwater treatment facilities would need to be increased. In the document, would this be a mitigation or is this actually part of the action? Part of the action is to increase maintenance and monitoring of the stormwater facilities, or is it merely going to be shown as mitigations? And I don't even know if that makes that much of a difference from the NEPA and environmental documents looking at it from that framework. But yeah, I don't know if it's just going to be shown as mitigation or not.
Yeah, Jacob Stock here. That is part of the policy proposal, is to increase maintenance on parcel level and area wide BMPs and create more of a create sort of a new system to ensure maintenance. So that is part of the proposal, not a mitigation.
Good.
Thank you, Robert. Final thoughts from APC members before we go to the public? I'll take that as a no. Okay, let's go to public comment on this item. First, we'll go to members of the public in the room. Please be prepared to come to the podium. State your name and give us a nice public comment. Following that, we will go to members of the public on Zoom. You can either click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone and you will be unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So first we'll go to members in the room. Good morning. And please push the little talking head there to turn the red light on. There you go. You got it.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. Danielle Hughes. I am the president and CEO of Tahoe Spark, a newly formed nonprofit working in the territory. What I haven't heard today is really discussion around the baseline information that's going to be used here. TRPA is presenting a package that is being proposed to support resident-supported policy refinement, and the analysis really doesn't set that up for clearly looking at that. You're putting in, you have, yes, these deed restricted, these different uses, but we are a declining resident population in the North Shore. I would say year over year right now, we are losing about 15% of our population per year because we can't afford to live here. You're mixing in and you're setting up programs that are really intended to use our mitigation, our housing mitigation. Example 39 North. of using to put J1 housing, to use our subsidies to put J1 housing for people that don't actually live here. They're not considered residents. Policy is set based on populations. The California, Nevada, everything is set based on populations. We are a declining population, and this needs to focus on actually updating baseline data. We need to define this by primary residents. Those are that are actually live here, count as our census, actually our population that can live here. Right now, our housing, you try and actually say that we have no growth, but no one has actually looked since 2012 when we developed the regional plan, and then 2013 when Airbnb and VRBO came out, the conversion of our existing housing. We are at 70% vacancy right now, and we are talking about bringing in high density housing, and I can't get insurance in my housing. Okay. I am on the FAIR plan. Most of my neighbors are on the FAIR plan. You're not talking about, is this housing even insurable in this location? So my insurance is expected to go up 60% this year. Do you think I can afford that as a resident? And you want to create more high density housing around me without actually assessing this and actually knowing if people are going to live in here, these homes. So I would continue to work on focusing on who you're actually trying to serve with these policy changes, and make sure that you're addressing the holistic market of what's happening here, because we're not addressing the transportation issues associated with the drive up market and the growth around us. So those populations matter. The last thing I will say is you have no discussion about really where we are on energy. I come from energy. That's why I've formed Tahoe Spark, and there will be legislative discussions with both states, because right now Liberty Territories' contract for their energy wholesale procurement expires in 2027. It was supposed to expire in December of 2025. We don't know where we're getting our energy from, and you guys are proposing high density housing. I can prove to you in the assets that we are paying for right now with these rate increases, which our rates have gone up 100% in 4 years. Neither state is overseeing it. And we are actually now going up again to subsidize costs and take our money out of the area to put into climate improvements in other areas of California by manipulating our wholesale market and our cost of energy up here. And you guys are not even paying attention to addressing the issues that the community and these residents in these houses that live here are dealing with. So you have no energy right now planned to serve this population. There is no forecast. Either state does not know where we are going to get our energy from after 2027. So please make sure that this is a priority in your discussion, in your analysis, and I will work with staff to understand what population actually means. You guys are using the Energy Commission's 7% growth in population for your forecasting. That's wrong.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Other members in the room, please come on up. Good morning.
Hello, John Grigsby, 16-year local resident, live down the street. On the whole, this is a big improvement from what was presented at the public workshop. I'll limit this to some major points because I have written feedback on the way. First, the conversion from commercial space and payouts is a valid concept, but when evaluating environmental impact, we cannot measure actual development against fictional businesses that never existed and tourists that never showed up to use payouts. We can only measure against actual existing usage and development. So just keep that in mind as we're looking here. Next, any study of the environmental impact of affordable by design housing must have a time horizon of at least the service life of the building, much longer than the proposed 15-year conversion time to unrestricted housing, and which has historically in Tahoe included a 10x or greater multiplication of property values. As a result, something like 70 to 80% of homes at the lake here are vacation homes, even though many were originally constructed as cheap summer cabins, which were affordable at the time. The EIS thus must include future projected property values 50, 60, and 70 years out in its evaluation, not just theoretical sales prices today or in 15 years. As evidence, I looked up the smallest and cheapest dwellings available in a few Colorado mountain towns. Vail, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 500 square foot condo, $625K. Telluride, 475 square feet, 1.1 million. Aspen, 377 square feet, 1.75 million. Again, we have to project the future property values out, not just what they go for today. And last, in order to mitigate the inevitable negative environmental impacts of increased density and coverage, there must be a corresponding direct and measurable benefit for each specific category of exemption and changes to the existing framework. For example, deed-restricted and income-restricted housing for local workers who are currently forced to live in Carson or the Valley can measurably and directly decrease VMTs, traffic, transit needs, and improve, fire access, evacuation access. That's an easy and obvious and easily measurable win. Now, the missing middle is a wonderful concept and it's a valid concept, but the burden here is on the TRPA and on this EIS to demonstrate specifically how this does anything but attract more Google engineers to buy second homes at the lake. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Other members of the public in the room, please come on up. Seeing none, Catherine, let's go online, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 hands raised online. First hand up is Nick Spiel. Nick, please unmute to make your comment.
Hello, this is Nick Spiel calling in support of moving this forward for the EIS. I just wanted to leave a suggestion with respect to some of the communications on this. I've heard a lot of discussion of the big population boom that this might cause, or how do we mitigate all the huge increase in population that might be associated with this. And I think it's worth just underscoring and clarifying that this is not proposing to increase any growth relative to the regional plan, relative to what's already approved. A lot of the focus, as I understand it, has been on allowing people to live closer together. And so when we talk about high density housing as if it's a scary concept, an alarming concept with a lot of people, moving to Tahoe, I really think that it's worth framing that in context, in contrast to more people living spread out. Just allowing them to live closer together is different than allowing many more people to move here. Apologies if there's any background noise. Relatedly, a lot of these rules are considered incentives, right? I hear a lot of discussion around incentivizing housing when really I think that we could be talking about just allowing people to build certain types of housing. And then it becomes less of sounding like kind of an incentive or a handout for market rate housing versus allowing someone to build an ADU in their backyard is the type of thing that I think should be allowed to do without forcing additional requirements upon them. Hopefully that helps. Thank you.
The next hand raise is Ann Nichols. Ann, please unmute to make your comment.
Yes, good morning, Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. I can't say enough about how Garth's comment on cumulative impacts is so important, because usually in these documents, they mention a couple of other projects, but they don't ever analyze it. And right now in the North Shore of Lake Tahoe with our 2-lane road, we have the Calneva, the Waldorf Astoria has been permitted, and it's now has very wealthy owners that should be able to do it. Plus 39 degrees, that's 500 new units within a mile and a half. Now, how are we supposed to do this? And I want a real analysis of this and no funny stuff. So anyway, I hope you can get that through. And, for decades, TRPA has allowed conversions between development right categories without a comprehensive accounting of their cumulative effects on residential intensity or population. The January 2026 proposal acknowledges this gap by proposing for the first time to study scaled conversion ratios. An agency cannot retroactively legitimize unmeasured growth by redefining it as baseline conditions. I've been in conversations with Karen Fink, and they don't really know, and we don't need development rights for conversions. So, and then what specific evidence does TRPA have that they rely on to conclude that the policy approach it has pursued since 2012, particularly incentive-based housing, flexible definitions, deferred analysis, will succeed now, given that prior iterations have failed to achieve stated outcomes? You keep saying, well, it might be a success. This is very dangerous. Whether intentional or not, the pattern consistently operates in one direction, removing constraints while preserving discretion. This is not transparent. Just hoping that TRPA will fix the stuff that's wrong now, figure out what the potential growth is now and the baseline, not to create a new baseline by this analysis. And it's almost like you've already approved it. It's an action item, and what they're asking you to do is say, yeah, and then later they'll say, well, the APC said this was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne.
And the last hand raised online is Sharon Kerrigan. Sharon, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, yes. My name is Sharon Kerrigan. I am the Executive Vice President for the South Tahoe Association of Realtors, and I'm also a real estate representative on the Tahoe Living Working Group. We did, from the South Tahoe Association of Realtors, submit a letter, but I believe it was after your deadline. It probably did not make it into your packet. So from my board of directors, wanted to make sure that this group was aware that they're asking as part of this process to ensure that attainable home ownership is a piece of the housing puzzle that is being considered and also made a priority. Their sentiment is that if we can find a way to make it affordable to build, then we can find a way to make it affordable for purchase. They do support reducing regulatory and procedural barriers that increase the per unit construction cost, modernizing the development rights system to better support smaller ownership-oriented housing types, those types of housing we affectionately call the starter homes, and encouraging that missing middle for sale housing, such as townhomes, condos, modest single-family residences. And from my hat of the Tahoe Living Working Group, I appreciate a lot of the discussion today. And I echo and support that we do need to vigorously ensure that we're looking at the effects of deed restrictions. Is that going to cause some of these properties not to be built? That's from my real estate experience. Folks are typically scared of that. Obviously, this is very effective for multi-unit housing. Sugar Pine Village is a phenomenal project. The deed restriction is going to protect that housing for years and years to come. When you look at deed restricting ADUs and single family homes and units like that, that often becomes problematic for folks. They shy away from it. So is that going to be something that's workable? And then Steve Teixeira's comments about the fire safety and the evacuation routes. We want to ensure that we're analyzing that. The public is going to scrutinize that. Obviously, look at Paradise with the one road in and out. Yes, and those are my comments today. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Sharon.
Mr. Chair, we had one more hand go up online. Alexis Aller, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning, Advisory Planning Commission members. Alexis Aller, Executive Director of Mountain Area Preservation. I want to thank you all not only for your service, but also looking at these the notice of preparation and the environmental impact statement so carefully. I think all of us who are participating in the process agree that this environmental review is really important, and utilizing the existing baseline conditions is really critical because as commenters and letter submissions have noted, this will be one of the first times that we evaluate not only where we're at with the build out of the basin, but where we are within the existing growth cap for the 2012 regional plan and what it means to look at some of these conversions. We have noted throughout the process that We are advocates of workforce housing, but we're very concerned about maintaining that growth cap and really honoring what we've set as the build out for the basin. And so I think that's really critical for this environmental impact statement, as well as the cumulative impacts analysis, as other commenters have noted. A lot of projects that are coming to certain pockets of the basin, as well as the development outside the basin. And I think looking at the benefits of utilizing that existing housing stock, right? Utilizing and unlocking units within jurisdictions so that workforce and local families can be near their employment centers and be near their schools and be in that hub. We have an opportunity to utilize a very large percentage of existing housing units. What's the environmental benefit for Tahoe? And I think that's really important in this environmental impact statement. And then, of course, I think it's been noted, but many of the policy considerations that MAP put forward are planning to be addressed. I believe planners have said that, and I'm not sure if APC members know that, but things like the income cap, I think Steve brought up a great point of how is that going to be evaluated in the environmental document, and when will that be discussed, knowing that so many of us want to ensure that we are advancing housing for the people that are in need, and that is low income and moderate, and the housing numbers show that. So I think we want to be very careful in this process, but also really evaluate what we need and what the existing conditions are. So again, thank you for your time, and we will be putting our comments on the record, our written comments, by March 16th.
Great. Thank you, Alexis.
And Mr. Chair, I believe we have one more comment in the room, if that's all right.
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. Good morning. Hi, Ellie.
Good morning. Sorry, hit traffic. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Is phase 3 the last phase anticipated for a while, since we're going to have an environmental impact statement and we'll have some finite analyses? I went to the goals and policies, LU 3.4, existing development patterns in residential neighborhoods outside of centers and environmentally sensitive land should be maintained with no significant change. I'm not sure how that all is going to be approached in this EIS. I'm hoping it's going to be upheld. Filling up the town centers with achievable, affordable, whatever we're going to call this, but not addressing lower income housing. Observation and reality check. There are very limited locations. Where is the fairness ratio applied for lower income requirements? Staff documentation and TRPA state that the extent feasible without compromising the growth management provisions of the regional plan, the attainment of threshold goals and affordable housing incentives, moderate income housing will be encouraged in suitable locations. This does not cover in the housing element, goal HS1, promote housing for full-time and seasonal residents, as well as workers employed within the region. Also, furthermore, HS 1.2, local governments will be encouraged, that's not enough, to assume their fair share of the responsibility to provide lower and very low income housing. HS 1.3, facilities shall be designed and occupied in accordance with local, regional, state, federal standards for the assistance of households with low and very low incomes. Such housing units shall be made available for rental or sale at the cost so that persons would not exceed the recommended state and federal standards. You also go into HS 1.4, affordable or government assisted housing for lower income households should be located in close proximity to employment centers, government service, and transit facilities. Tahoe City had a perfect opportunity when the garden nursery was for sale, but instead sold to the Tahoe City Public Utility District. It met all that criteria, near a transit center, near downtown, compatible with nearby Grand Lebacan neighborhood. We can't tell people how they sell and what they do, but we do have opportunities missed. The goal HS2, the extent feasible without compromising the growth management, the attainment of the goals. I said it again. Why single out certain AMI levels only? I do agree with there's capacity studies necessary, existing conditions, conversions. All of this needs to be held more accountable so we understand how we're going to address every level of income. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waller.
And there are no more hands raised to comment.
All right, great. Thanks, Catherine. We'll close public comment. Thank you for those comments, everyone. We did receive comment letters that are posted on TRPA's website as well. Let's see. We heard public comment. Let's have some final thoughts from APC before we wrap this up, and we'll go to Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve DeShera for the record. Jacob, responding to the comments made by Ms. Hughes, I'm looking under public services and utilities, and it lists water supply, wastewater collection, treatment, solid waste, fire protection, schools, and other public services. And I think this is just a reading of what EIS does, but it seems like for purposes, we ought to highlight energy supply as one of those to dig into the issues that Ms. Hughes raised on the energy side. So I think that was a good comment that we should make sure we flag out energy as a specific. Thank you.
Yep. Agreed. Thanks, Steve. Other comments from APC members? Okay. I guess I'll just say, you know, I personally think this is just an incredibly important project, you know, for the future of where we all live here. We care deeply about this. We're taking this very seriously. And, you know, we want continued success here. We want this to be a successful endeavor. So everyone needs to continue to put their best foot forward, I think, and try to be constructive to support this effort. We need to test the biggest, you know, and best or highest impact, you know, scenario that we foresee in this EIS, knowing that we can always scale back from there. But we really need to test what can the environmental thresholds sustain without degrading the environment with appropriate mitigation. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out, to staying involved. And we're all, I know, taking it pretty seriously. So thank you for bringing it forward. Steve has one more. Here he comes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there were a couple of references during the comments from APC and the public to NEPA, but the EIS we're talking about is under the rules of EIS related to TRPA. It's TRPA's document. Yes,
That's correct.
yeah, okay. Not that there aren't some comparative similarities, but I just want everybody to be clear that this is an EIS under TRPA's rules and regulations and procedures, not a NEPA document.
Mr. Chairman, John Hester, and also not CEQA.
Right, and not a CEQA document. Thank you.
Okay. Let's tie a bow around it. We'll let you go off on your day, Jacob. Thank you for being here. Good luck. We're going to transition to Mr. Segan here in a second as we move on to agenda item 4C. As you recall, we did continue item 4B until next month. This is a discussion and possible recommendation for approval of proposed water quality environmental threshold carrying capacities. Information on this item can be found on page 233 in your packet. Members will most likely recall that we did hear a presentation from Dan last month on this item as a kind of a tee up. I did ask Dan to please not repeat that presentation to us. We'll see if he complies with that order that I gave him. I'm not his boss, but we're looking forward to hearing what Dan says. So good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Dan Segan, TRPA. I intend to comply by that recommendation, Mr. Chairman. And I do not intend to repeat the entire presentation we gave you last month, but am open to questions on any and all of that. I think before I go into the item, I wanted to clarify a little bit the three different agenda items that you saw before you today, including the one that was pulled, that all referenced the threshold standards, and clarify, I think, both for the commission and for the public, the relationship between those individual items and what was and was not proposed. Because I think in our review of the public comment that we received related to those three items, it seemed like there was a little bit of confusion about what was actually on the table. And so I want to clarify for the record, there are no proposed changes to the VMT standard. We have not had any conversation about changing the VMT standard. In addition, we have not had any conversations about modifying or changing the role of threshold standards within our regional management framework. The role of the threshold standards is given to us by the Bi-State Compact, and it elevates that above just about everything else that we do. So the regional plan, which we prepare and maintain along with you and implement with our partners, is still designed to achieve and maintain those thresholds. And there has been no conversation of modifying that. In fact, modifying that would require a modification of the Bi-State Compact and reorient the agency. The changes that were proposed as part of the reorganization referred not to the role of the threshold standards within our system, but into how we present those standards to you and to the public. So as you'll remember, in 2021, we did a reorganization of some of our documents, and we co-located the threshold standards with our regional plan to provide a better flow. Overall goals first, our plan and mechanism to get there second. It was in a single document. Since we did that action, a number of people have commented that the structure is a little bit odd and potentially dated. We now have two different introduction sections to a single document. And so the reorganization that we'll be discussing next month is about a reorganization of that document. It does not formally modify the role of the threshold standards or any threshold standards individually. With that, I'll dive into my item, which is going to be a brief presentation.
Yeah,
I promise.
thanks for the clarification there.
No worries. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of that or the proposal today. So as you'll remember, there are two elements of our threshold update initiative. There are the administrative updates to our threshold standards, and then there are the substantive updates. The water quality updates that are before you today as part of this agenda item are part of that administrative bin. And after this presentation, we'll shift over to the substantive updates to our vegetation preservation standards for forest health. Next slide, please. So why are we doing these administrative updates? And a lot of this work dates back to 2018, 2017 era. When we engaged the Science Advisory Council, they identified for us that our 40-some year old standards did not always live up to best practice for the articulation of standards, and were not always clear to partners, stakeholders, and the general public as to what we're actually trying to accomplish. So from that time, we have been on a mission to improve the quality of our standards, and the co-location action that I mentioned earlier in the introduction was part of this effort to make it clear what we are trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish that. Next slide, please. In the most recent threshold evaluation, you'll also remember that we had significant public comment on that evaluation and engaged both you, the governing board, and members of the public in what does this evaluation mean and what does it mean for our work plan. And one of the things that we heard was frustration related to our standards for things like implemented as opposed to specific and measurable, and status could not be determined. And many of these items, if you'll recall, the status could not be determined is we have a suite of standards that don't have baselines that allow us to make a status determination. So if you don't have a specific goal, it's very hard to say if you've reached that goal. And as an outcome of that evaluation and in response to public comment and concern raised both by committee members and by members of the governing board, we redoubled our efforts to update and improve our threshold standards. And both of the actions that you're listening to today are in response to those and can be viewed in that vein. They are intended to make the system more transparent and to make it clearer to you and to others how we are doing on what we are on our mission overall. Next slide, please. That said, I'm not going to reiterate the entire presentation for what's in the water quality. I do want to call attention to the one piece that has changed since we went over the proposal in detail in January. So the one modification that we are proposing is to Water Quality Standard 7, and it's a revision to the text of the standard to clarify the intent. So the intent of the standard, and this is a recommendation that originated with the Science Council review of these standards. And they pointed out that as the standard is currently written, what the agency should be evaluating is not the total amount of algae within our nearshore, but rather the extent to which we have supported actions to reduce that. And what the council suggested and was reaffirmed by the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, as well as the Environmental Improvement Program Committee of our governing board, was that we should modify to clarify to all that what the intent of the standard is actually to reduce excessive periphyton, not simply to support actions that may reduce that. And that modification is also consistent with how we've evaluated the standard in the past. Next slide, please. With that, I am happy to entertain questions on any and all parts of the proposal, but I'll turn it over to you all to guide that discussion.
Thank you, Dan. Was that too short for members? Does anyone want a little more? It's my fault. So I blame it on myself. Can you, Dan, just give us the high level summary? These are administrative changes, right? Except for the one wording change there. So this is sort of a reorganization. You showed this to us last time. Kind of a reworking of the water quality threshold standards, but not substantive changes. And you're looking for our recommendation to your governing board on those changes for them to approve that. Is that fair?
That's 100% correct.
Okay. So nothing really fundamentally changing.
No, so what we've said and what potentially has changed, not as part of the substantive package that you would be recommending approval of, but in terms of the documentation that we are bringing forward, is the table in your packet that highlights each of the individual standards, the proposal for what happens to that standard, and then the notes that provide the rationale for that standard. So one of the questions we have received as part of the conversations related to these modifications is this going to modify how you monitor water quality within our region? Is it going to change how you monitor impacts on our streams? Is it going to change in-lake or nearshore monitoring? And the answer to that is no. It's as the chairman suggested, the proposal before you is to reorganize the information that we collect and put each in its appropriate bin so that we don't treat all as sort of equally coexistent goals, but we recognize that some of these bits of information we are collecting to understand how well we are doing, and others we are collecting because it serves us to tell us how well we've done overall. So if you think about, I've used a number of different analogies, and I'll attempt a different one today. But if you imagine that the overall goal I've set for myself in 2026 is running a 4-minute mile. in this framework, it's not really my goal, but I would like to imagine that it was. Within this framework that the Science Advisory Council has suggested, they've said, great, your goal, which you've defined in a specific and measurable fashion, should be your threshold standard. So running a 4-minute mile is my threshold standard. As you can probably imagine, I'd probably have to initiate a whole suite of things in order to achieve that goal. I probably have to improve my eating. I probably have to sleep more. I probably need to run more. And all of those things, which are currently commingling with this overall goal, should be in some other part of your system. So that my tracking of how quickly I'm running miles today, or how many miles I've run each week, or how many bars of chocolate I eat in the evening, should not be commingling with my overall goal, because neither I nor anyone else who's tracking my progress towards the 4-minute mile is going to celebrate when I've hit my training target for an individual week. And one of the things the Science Advisory Council pointed out is it gets really confusing when you put, everything all on the same level. And you need to, if you're trying to orient a system to drive towards attainment of a specific goal, you need to be very clear both to yourself and to others where everything fits in that overall system and why you are doing each part and what end it serves.
Good. Yeah, thank you in your endeavor to run that. Garth, just for anyone listening, Garth, help me find kind of the table, the standard crosswalk, which is attachment E. It starts on page 258 in the packet. I think that's a really tidy, this kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, this is sort of the summary of your proposal, right? The name of the standard, the text, the proposal, which most of them are just to retain, and then some notes. So that's just a handy tool for us and the public to see what's happening here.
That's correct. And you saw a different version of that documentation earlier on, that we'd received feedback that the documentation and the rationale was incomplete. So we've tried to augment that in the more recent version. I should also know the first page is mostly to retain. That's because the way the water quality standards were currently structured was that the lower number ones happen to be more in line with our overall goals, and then the latter standards related to ways that we wanted to achieve those goals. So if the proposal where it says retain, that first page, you're correct, it's mostly retain. And then after that, it's primarily remove. And for each remove, there's an explanation for why we're suggesting that it's removed, e.g., which part of the system should it live? And then do we need any modification to the existing regional plan or the code in order to achieve that? And many of those standards already appear in other parts of our system. So there's no modification necessary.
Thank you. So it's either like remove or move or cited elsewhere kind of a thing, it sounds like.
Yes, many. So I think we refined the proposal to be just specifically related to the action as would it stay as a threshold or not, even though many are retained in other parts of our system.
Okay, that makes sense. Great, thank you, Dan. Okay, who wants to weigh in? Garth?
Dan, thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this and for updating this table. It's really helpful and transparent. I think one important thing for you to communicate to the public, and also maybe some other members of the APC, can you talk about the process that staff has gone through with reviewing all of these changes and taking recommendations from the Science Advisory Council and the TUI SWIG? Can you just sort of outline all that? I think it's important to recognize the effort and the work that's gone into this, and it's not just staff coming up with these ideas and wanting to change it. There's some background to it.
I'm happy to, at the risk of offending the chairman next to you. So the The process here started with this initial review of our overall threshold standards. And the high level takeaway was that the Science Advisory Council recommended to us that every threshold standard should be specific, measurable, and outcome based. After that, we did a review of our system, and we had 172, I think, threshold standards at the time. And we said, how did each standard live up to that overall criteria? And it's probably no secret to anyone that the vast majority fell short of being specific, measurable, and outcome based. And so we engaged the Science Advisory Council on a task of, okay, if we want to go from the system we have today to the idealized system that you've proposed to us, what are the incremental steps that we take to get there? And we specifically engaged them in this water quality category because the water quality standards were the most numerous to begin with, and also because they had the most that didn't live up to this overall ideal, but also included a lot of things that seemed really important to us. Because I think it's important to recognize that just because something is not a threshold standard doesn't mean it's not an action required to achieve that standard. And what the council basically said, and they said something which is surprisingly simple, of like, just reorganize the system like we said. But reorganizing the system at first, I think, seems very much like a drastic change. And I think, there's a light where you can view today's as a really drastic change if you haven't dug into it. And so I think it took us a fair bit of time to work through, both with partners on the Threshold Update Initiative stakeholder working group, with partners in each of the states, laying out the proposal and then explaining how that proposal would impact things on the ground. And so we've gone through that vetting process. We actually began, I think, as I mentioned last time, about 5 years ago. We took a little bit of break while we focused on some other things. But we did remain committed to this overall task of a more transparent system. And so we brought that back to, I think, we brought that back to the Advisory Planning Commission for a detailed session last month. The Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, which is an advisory planning commission committee that includes some governing board members and some members of the public, reviewed this proposal 3 times. And that's in part why you're still seeing some of these last minute changes, like the wording to Water Quality 7. They finally endorsed this proposal last month. Then we presented the full proposal to the Environmental Improvement Program Committee of our governing board, who also reviewed and endorsed these changes, or recommended that the governing board adopt them. At each of those, they're all publicly noticed meetings, including the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group meeting. We've offered opportunity for public comment as well.
Thank you. I think I know that you've mentioned and discussed all this in the past, but I really think it's important that everyone understands the level of involvement that's happened in the past, and to be able to move forward comfortably. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Garth. I think that's critically important. This is not happening overnight by any means. Dan's aged with this process, like all of us. Who else would like to jump in? Steve, Hitch? Okay, let's go online. APC members online. Any hands want to shoot up? Yes, Mr. Ehrlich, go ahead.
Hi, Robert Ehrlich for the record. Thanks for the background on all the work that's gone into proposing these changes. There's the sections on thresholds for tributary surface water and groundwater. Those were all eliminated or moved over basically into a different category. There's one threshold remaining for other lakes, which I think is good to keep. Can you explain why the TSAC and the other groups viewed, say, the tributary thresholds as strategies and the other lakes threshold as a tactic? I'm wondering if there's maybe a possibility or reasons you didn't include, just leave that one for other lakes. Yeah, make that one other lakes and tributaries. The standard for it is, let's see, achieve, water quality standards. I can't remember what the language was, but could you go over the process where lakes were left in as a threshold, but the tributaries were not? Thank you.
Is this WQ33, Robert?
I have to switch just a second.
It looks like it is, just for your reference, Dan.
Yeah, other lakes is 33, and then there were a whole bunch of different ones for surface discharge, and then prior to that, there were a bunch of tributary ones that are like 15 through 18. But I'm wondering just on the choice of, I think the language used for other lakes, I've got to get back up to that page. I think it's something like achieve other, meet standards, and I assume that will refer to. Let's see if I can find it. Sorry.
While you're looking, should I start to answer?
Oh, please.
That'd
Yeah.
be useful.
I think you probably know the language used on the other lakes one.
Yep. And I'll start with the other lakes one first as I endeavor to answer the question. So the other lake standards that Robert is referring to is water quality standard number 33. And we did have robust discussion on this because the Science Advisory Council did initially identify it as a tactic, and tactics live in other parts of our system. They're not the objectives that are intended to be threshold standards. And so part of the discussion we had was, should we remove this standard because we're moving the most tactics to other parts of our system? And part of the reason that the Science Advisory Council identified other lakes as a tactic rather than as an objective, because I think you can imagine the objective of maintaining water quality in other lakes within our system as a goal in and of itself.
Yeah.
But the background information for that threshold standard that led to it being adopted related to the intent of highlighting the hydrologic connection between other lakes and water bodies and Tahoe itself. And so what the Science Advisory Council highlighted is, if you are adopting this goal with the primary intent of preserving and protecting Lake Tahoe, then it's a tactic. It doesn't live on its own. And I think part of our discussion within this group was twofold. And I should emphasize that the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group has been conservative in recommending removal of threshold standards where the intent of the standard is not highlighted in another part of our system. And so I think I'll harken back to, I guess it's 5 years ago now, we removed a whole suite of policy statements. So policy statements were a unique type of threshold standard. When the threshold standards were initially articulated and adopted, we did not have a regional plan yet for the region. And so the policy statements were defined as guidance to the agency in developing the regional plan. So they were intended to provide guidance. And as part of the cleanup, the policy statements, I should also say, drew particular ire both from the Science Advisory Council and peer reviewers of the threshold evaluation, because they expressed a broad sentiment or an intent, but nothing specific or actionable that you should do. So we recommended and then subsequently removed most of the policy statements within the threshold standard system. The two that we did not related to recreation within our region. And we didn't remove those at that time because we didn't have an appropriate alternative to them, and we wanted to preserve that intent. And I think the same logic guided the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group's recommendation to retain this for the time being, while we consider, do we need other standards that relate to other water bodies within our region? The logic related to, I think you're asking also about everything from, I would say, water quality 15 to water quality 32, which articulate a suite of goals, starting with tributaries, which reference state standards, and then moving into specific concentration goals for surface runoff, and finally then for groundwater discharge. Taking those from the back, water quality 23 through 32 are site level or site specific guidelines that anyone operating in the region or doing construction in the region must comply with. They are already included within the regional plan and code of ordinances, and so they can be removed as threshold standards to not confuse others on the overall progress of our system. They are there to protect the water quality of the lake and our tributaries. The surface runoff standards and the concentration follow. So those are water quality 19 through 22, follow a similar rationale, and as does the tributary standards. Although the tributary standards reference state standards that no longer exist, at least for the first three of them. I should also remind people that related to one of the compact's requirements is that our regional plan achieve and maintain all state, local, or federal air and water quality standards. And so there was some discussion earlier on, I think this dates back 6 years. We did not rehash it in the most recent version of this, was why had we highlighted these specific water quality standards rather than just referencing all state and local water quality standards, given that that is already a compact requirement. I think the thought was it was all right to remove those which no longer referenced viable state standards, and then the other goals which were really serving as a measure of our efficacy in reducing concentrations in the streams. But again, those were established not for specific in-stream goals, but to serve the overall water quality of the lake, including preserving and protecting lake clarity, as well as reducing nearshore algae and improving nearshore clarity.
Well,
Hopefully
then,
that.
Well, no, I understand, but having the detailed individual ones, those are maybe tactics or strategies. But and I don't want to see the other lakes one removed, but if that's an objective, would it cause some problems if you did other lakes and tributaries and then just use the same language, attain existing water quality standards, and identify and continue that as an objective?
So we did actually appreciate the question again, Dan Segan, TRPA. Our recommendation at this time is to not modify the language of the standard, given there's some ambiguity into the language, but we have, I think, scheduled it for a future, or we will schedule it for a future discussion at the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, because there was sentiment related to, or there was a question about whether or not we should expand the header of that to include tributaries, other water bodies within the region, and then what meaning the header had within our system. And is that actually, would that be a more inclusive and more protective version of that standard? And so I think I would recommend keeping it as is for this time and giving some additional time for discussion, and hopefully we can revise that wording to, I think, please both the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group as well as the sentiment being expressed in the commission.
Okay. Yeah, if it's on the, if there are plans to revisit that is the issue that changing the language here would be a change to the actual language on the other lakes one? That would be difficult. That would cause more difficulties, or because you'd be adding say tributaries. I like the idea of recognizing, and I think you alluded to the fact that they recognize that water bodies that discharge into the lake have impacts on the lake. And I'd like maybe if there could be some commitment to review that and come back with that relatively soon. That would be appreciated.
Mr. Ehrlich, this is Graham St. Michel, General Counsel. I'll try to jump in as well. Yeah, this was something that Dan and I discussed, and my recommendation was just the other lakes, and it's a very short, attain existing water quality standards. My recommendation when we talked about it was just to leave that alone. Sometimes when you add language and open up, you put additional words in a header, other water bodies, things, there can be just unintended consequences that you're not thinking about. So this is definitely something that we can go back. My recommendation was just to leave it alone because it wasn't really, from my understanding, like a key part of this, a big discussion. How well did we vet these potential unintended consequences? Who knows? You could think about just different when you add those additional words, what all did we consider and what all could get looped into that. And I would just add that we can continue thinking about that. Just for APC's awareness, we run all of these threshold and plan changes through APC, but it's under the compact. The governing board can take action and on some of these things, even if they don't, even if that's not exactly before APC and part of the recommendation. So it's part of our process to take these to APC, but it's not fatal flaw if this doesn't go through the APC right now. So I think Dan and I can go back, review the record of the working group, and just see if that's something that we, want to do at this time, while trying to avoid those potential consequences. So I think we all appreciate the comment here.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman. So thank you for the discussion. I specifically remember the Tui Swig conversation about this and the unintended consequences. And I think it's important for everybody to understand who's on Tui Swig, that there are 2 governing board members that are on it, as well as the Science Advisory Council and others. Maybe you want to just quickly run through the roster of who's on it. I've got a couple of them right here, and I remember the specific conversation. I appreciate Mr. Ehrlich's question, but it's one of those things, how many times you're going to go over the same issue? So Dan, if you could help with the membership of TUI Swig.
Thank you, Dan Segan again. So the TUI Swig includes 2 governing board members. It includes, should I say the individuals? No. 2 governing board members, a representative, I think, of a community member, which I think is actually Mr. Teixeira. He sits not in an APC seat. There are 4 APC seats on the TUI Swig, and then 1 environmental seat, which is currently filled by the League to Save Lake Tahoe. I should also say, we sound very hesitant to make what is a seemingly small change. And I think to Garth's point earlier, we have been, I think when updating threshold standards, we have been very cautious and largely averse to quick changes. So this discussion, I think, started about a month ago. And I think we will bring it back to the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, because I think they expressed the same sentiment for greater protection under that standard and not limiting it. I think we want to be careful in moving forward with those changes, but we will continue to bring that back and work it through the process.
I think that's fair. Yeah, we need years, not months. I'm just kidding. No, but policy changes from the dais often have unintended consequences. So I agree. Vet that. And we'll talk it through should we need to. Okay. How's everyone feeling? I don't see any other hands raised. Miss Fiore Wagner, are you coming off mute to say something?
I am. Thank you, Chair Ferry. Sorry, I'm having issues with the raise the hand function. I just wanted to say, Dan, appreciate the work and the collaboration you've done with your team at TRPA and also leveraging the Science Council. I think the administrative changes seem to make sense as far as organizing and restructuring those thresholds and, maybe making them more tangible when we're having conversations about the long-term goals. I did have a question on, I think it was water quality 7, with the periphyton, that one that's being modified slightly to now it's going to be reduce the extent versus support the actions. The actions would still be retained in it. They would still be binned within the code. Is that correct?
Dan speaking again. The actions would still be required to achieve the threshold. The language clarification is intended to say that just doing something is not enough if it is not actually reducing the extent and distribution.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that okay? Is that satisfactory, Mary, or?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that question. Dan, I just found a couple broken links in that table. I just wanted to mention it to you. Not too big of a deal, but the water board link, and this is in that same table we've been looking at, sends me to a 404 page, and the Tahoe Science Council link also sends me to a page that doesn't exist.
I apologize for that. We will fix those and then repost to the website.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, final thoughts. I believe we have an action on this one. Oh, we need to go to public comment. Pardon me. Let's move to public comment on item 4C. We'll first go to members of the public who wish to make a comment in the room. Please come to the podium, state your name, turn the microphone on. Then we will move to members of the public who join us on Zoom. Again, for members on Zoom, please utilize the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. First, let's go to members of the public wishing to comment on item 4C in the room. Seeing none, Catherine, we will go online, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, we will close public comment. We do have 2 motions to make on item 4C. We have them on the screen for those of you who can read them. And if anyone would like to make the first motion, I would certainly entertain that.
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I move that we recommend that the governing board approve the required findings, including a finding of no significant effect as shown in attachment A.
Second.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Ms. Stoller, for the second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote on the first motion. Please, Tracy.
Ms. Fiore Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Aye.
Mr. Young, We'll circle back. Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Mr. Young is still online, but okay, he might have connection issues. Thank you, Tracy. Okay, we have a second motion. It's on the screen.
Happy to make it, sir.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I move to recommend that the governing board adopt ordinance number 2026 to be determined, amending ordinance 2019-03. It's in attachment B, updating the water quality environmental threshold carrying capacities in attachment C.
Second.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ellery, for the second. Tracy, we'll go back to you. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Fury Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion also passes.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, great. Thank you all. That concludes item 4C. Great job, Dan, as always. Thank you so much. Good luck at the governing board. Assuming next month? This month. Okay, great. Good. And we'll move on to item 4D. We have Mason joining us. This is a discussion and possible recommendation for approval of proposed revisions to the vegetation preservation threshold standards related to forest health. Information on this item can be found on page 303 of our packets. And we have Mason Bindle here from TRPA to present on this item. Hi there.
Morning. Members of the Commission, Mason Bindle, TRPA staff for the record. So I'm here today to continue the conversation around our forest health vegetation preservation update that you received a briefing on last month from Dan Segan. Sorry, I missed that. I was out last month, but we're really excited to bring this proposal to you. Since we last spoke, we received recommendations from the Threshold Update Stakeholder Working Group to advance the proposal, as well as the Environmental Improvement Program Committee for the Governing Board. And as a high-level overview, our aim with this proposal is to ensure that these standards reflect the goals of the partnership, which is to restore a healthy forest so that we have a forest that persists into the future. Next slide, please. And I won't rehash everything Dan covered in detail per chair's recommendation last month, but the brief overview of what the system or the updates to the system will consist of are two main subcategories. The first being a fire dynamics subcategory that'll have two standards. One will be aimed at our community wildfire protection in the WUI defense zone, where we aim to have an outcome that is mostly surface fire. And then in the landscape, we'll have a landscape fire dynamic standard where we aim to have fire burn at ecologically beneficial role. And then the second subcategory, forest structure, this is really where we're going to describe the desired outcome for our forest condition, the stand density we'd like to achieve, and the healthy mosaic of developmental stages that are resilient in the face of disturbance. So those two categories really get at the state of the forest and the process that shapes it and create that holistic view of forest health we aim to achieve and embed into the forest or threshold system. Next slide, please. And as Dan dove into the science and the rationale behind the standards, we wanted to highlight some of the process that we went through. So any good scientific review or scientific process includes a healthy peer review. And so Bob Larson through the Tahoe Science Advisory Council led that effort. And we'd like to just say a big thank you for Bob bringing Dr. Pat Manley and Dr. Hugh Safford into the fold. Their feedback has been invaluable in shaping shaping these standards and shaping the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. They helped us since July. They've been engaged, and they've really helped us adjust those targets so that they remain relevant in the face of a warmer and drier future for our forest structure in particular. And they outlined a bunch of other science that we should continue to monitor and follow to see if there's any specific measurable outcomes we'd like to add in the future. And you might see some of this show up as either management strategies in the regional plan in the future, or potentially performance measures that help us speak to the status and trend of attainment of these newly proposed standards. Those scientists, Dr. Pat Manley and Dr. Hugh Safford, also helped us kind of think through a monitoring plan that'll help us inform the remote sensing that we'll need to assess these standards. So really heartfelt thank you and invaluable feedback from the Tahoe Science Advisory Council throughout this process. Next slide, please. And on top of the scientific peer review, we also put out a website so that the public could understand the proposal in detail, and then provided a survey to get some feedback and solicit some feedback. And as you can imagine, the folks that got all the way through that material and actually submitted to the survey were highly informed about the subject matter. So it was good to see some engagement, but the engagement we got echoed a lot of what we saw with the science, knowing that we need active management to restore our forests to a healthy state so they can withstand disturbance and persist. And that wildfire mitigation is the top priority, protecting our life and property, protecting the forest from catastrophic wildfire. And then the other part of this is the public and some of the survey results really wanted to see the transparency and how we assess these standards. And we're committed to that through the threshold evaluation. And you'll see all that show up on the threshold dashboard if and when these standards go live in the threshold system. Next slide, please. And just a few updates since we last spoke. We engaged with the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, and they provided some thoughtful feedback. One was the gap in protection for subalpine conifer communities we'll go over. And then they had us add some more action-oriented language to the standards. We worked with Graham and legal to kind of craft the language for each standard so that it was action-oriented, outcome-based. And then I had a little bit of an oversight in the language in the landscape fire dynamic standard that I'll cover in the last slide. Next slide, please. So since we last spoke, we formally added the subalpine conifer standard, which the proposal here is a non-degradation standard for our subalpine conifer communities. Some of our most sensitive species are in the high elevation, and they don't really have the same sort of issues that the lower elevation forests face with stand density and a mid-serial overstocked homogeneous stands. What we're facing in the high elevation is more of a climate stress limited system where we need to provide restoration outcomes and prevent the loss of any more of the subalpine conifer forest. So this standard really aims at non-degradation of that area. And then it gives us really protections for all of our forests from the ridge down to the lake. So this was a welcome addition from the TUI-SWIG feedback. Next slide, please. And then adding an active voice. We want these standards to be action-oriented, outcome-based. So what we did was in the beginning of each standard, we added some action verbs. So achieve and maintain a stand density that's healthy, achieve and maintain a healthy mosaic of forest, manage forest and field conditions so that surface fire is the likely outcome, limit the area of high severity fire so that fire burns in an ecologically beneficial way. So those are the tweaks to the actual language you'll see in attachment B. And then next slide, please. And then lastly, as I was rerunning the analysis last month, I realized the intent and area we were going to assess for the landscape fire dynamic standard wasn't clearly delineated in the standard language. So you'll see in the red what we're cutting out, and then the green in the erratum you'll see as part of your materials. The green is what is being added. So this standard will be assessed on all managed lands where we can actually have and achieve the outcome. So it'll exclude urban areas and designated wilderness where we don't have the same authority or action to take to achieve the outcome. And next slide, please. With that, thank you, and I'll take comment or questions.
Thanks a lot, Mason. Yeah, I think you guys have done a really fantastic job on this one. I mean, kudos to everyone involved. I think we said this last month. It really seems like a team effort, well supported, backed by science. I've been very impressed. I've seen you present on this several times. I think it's really impressive to see where we've come. I'm looking forward to support it, but I'm curious to hear others' thoughts. We did have that errata sheet that was submitted late into the record. Thanks for noting that. I welcome the subalpine addition. That seems very right to me. I'm glad it was considered. Ms. Carr, let's go to you. I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for considering my request to add those more active voice to the four elements that were just discussed. And I appreciate consideration of that comment and making those changes. I think it clarifies what we're working towards. So I appreciate that follow-up. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Chief Drennan, can I put you on the spot and make sure you're comfortable here?
Yeah, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me as something to be concerned about. I think the report's really thorough and well done. So
great. Thank you so much for weighing in. Appreciate it.
Just jump in. I'd like to thank Chief Drennan. He provided a letter of support on behalf of the fire chiefs in the Tahoe Basin.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you. Good. Let's see. Members in the room, anything? Actually, I see some hands raised. My bad. Ms. Stoller, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, appreciate all of the research and study that has gone into this. And I think from my perspective, we at State Lands, we're responsible for managing a lot of the landscape on the Nevada side of the lake and the state park, as well as on our urban lots. And so from our perspective, I think we appreciate the flexibility that these thresholds can provide, while at the same time we are working very diligently to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire, and these thresholds help us get there. We do balance that with the needs of wildlife and particularly some sensitive species. So I think that the flexibility that the thresholds provide will allow us to achieve kind of all of those benefits that we need to maintain. So just wanted to put that on the record from the Nevada side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stoller. Let's see, one other hand raised. Mr. Ehrlich, we'll go to you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Thanks for all the good work. I like the tables were easy to understand. Appreciate that change. I have a question. Again, I haven't been involved in this process on shrub communities, stuff I may have called mountain chaparral, and then with changing climate, if some of the things that might be identified as otherwise as early state, early seral stage, Jeffrey pine forest might actually not be coming back as that, and might be coming back as shrub. There used to, one of the things eliminated was something to keep the shrub community at less than 25%. And I think I saw that it was, last time they looked at it was like 8% or something. But I'm wondering, just in terms of fire threat and stuff, I live near the Gardner Mountains, so I walk through the Angora Burn area, and a lot of that is 6 foot high, very dense shrub. I don't know if it'll come back as Jeffrey pine or mixed conifer, and I'm just wondering if the shrub areas are also ones that could generate large patches fires in excess of the 4 foot height, and whether they're adequately addressed, or whether we may want to look at some categories just for shrub. I saw there was some language on the interfaces that you want to prevent them from having large patches that would have the bad fires. I'm just wondering if there was, maybe let me know about some of the discussion you had over shrub, and whether some of the forests that are mapped as forests are unlikely to come back as forests in this climate.
Yeah, Mason Bindle, for the record. Thank you for the question. That was something we grappled with both the practitioners and the scientists as we developed these proposals. And ultimately, I think the group felt that the tactic of where and when shrub emerges is up to the land management agencies, but promoting an outcome of early cereal where Forest Service thinks there should be early cereal, or land managers think there should be early cereal, is inherent in the serial stage standard. And to your question about the landscape fire dynamic standard, it does assess all fuel types on all managed lands. So shrubs that are at risk of burning at high severity are also part of that assessment.
Good.
So it's really a matter of south-facing slopes that shouldn't have forest might not be replanted as early cereal, but if the Forest Service in the Caldor, for instance, wants to replant that north-facing slope, that'll count towards attainment of the early cereal category.
Okay, and then I think the shrubs near the urban interface are adequately addressed in terms of management.
Yes, that's correct. Those will be considered in both fire dynamic standards within the WUI defense zone. That modeling or that predictive fire hazard isn't limited to forested landscapes. It's all fuel types and all lands.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Other hands, other thoughts? I was just going to mention, because my wife's a botanist, that there are other plant standards for sensitive species listed in here as well, which is great to see. This isn't all about fire and trees, so there's standards in there as well.
Mason, for the record, that's a good point. The common vegetation, sensitive, and uncommon plants categories remain unchanged with the addition of subalpine conifer standard into the common vegetation category. The highlight really is the two new subcategories, fire dynamics and forest structure, that were kind of missing from the system to speak to the healthy, holistic view of a forest.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good to go to public comment here. So let's do it. You've heard me say this a few times. Here we go to public comment. This is item 4D. We'll first take members in the room, come to the podium. Then we will move to members of the public joining us via Zoom. Again, click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So we'll go into the room. Looks like they're debating who's going first. We're going to get Miss Patton. Hi there.
Hi, good morning, Chair, members of APC. Laura Patton, Natural Resource Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, or Keep Tahoe Blue for the record. We really, I've said this before, we really appreciate the work by staff, Mason and Dan in particular, the Science Advisory Council, and really all of the partners, especially the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, for all the work reflected not only in the forest health update, but also the water quality update as well. We really support the direction of these updates and the continued effort to modernize Tahoe's environmental thresholds so they remain science-based, measurable, and outcome focused. And we really think that the focus on the outcomes has really shown in this update. Clear outcome-based standards really help the public and decision makers understand whether the environmental goals are actually being achieved, while also maintaining those protections through TRPA code, the Environmental Improvement Program, and also the TMDL implementation as well. We strongly support the forest health threshold update, recognizing fire as a natural ecological process and managing forests for actual resilience rather than specific kind of static conditions really reflects the best available science and is essential to bringing Tahoe's forests, watersheds, and water quality up to the 21st century standards. At the same time, we really encourage TRPA to commit to updating all of the remaining thresholds before the next threshold evaluation cycle, including updating some of the other vegetation standards as well, evaluating basin conditions against outdated standards, mostly from 1982 when ET was out, does not really fully meet the compact's mandate and risk limiting the effectiveness of the threshold program and everything that we work on together. The thresholds really are not just a TRPA standard, they're a standard by which all implementers in the basin really measure the environmental health and quality of the basin. And this update really shows that meaningful modernization is achievable. So we encourage TRPA to really continue that momentum across all the resource areas. And thanks for your leadership and moving these forward to governing board.
Thank you, Laura.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Bob Larson. I work for the California Natural Resources Agency, and I serve as the Program Officer for the Tahoe Science Advisory Council. Mason already stole my thunder mostly on the peer review, but I do want to read a few comments into the record. First, I want to echo the thanks to Drs. Hugh Safford and Patricia Manley for their time and thoughtful feedback during the process. They both reviewed initial drafts and met several times with staff and really had good dialogue all along during the process and helped support the effort. So thanks to both of those professionals for spending their time. Next, I want to stress that the proposal before you represents an important first step for the basin. Both reviewers found that the updated thresholds are consistent with current science and best practices, and the selected metrics reflect the core drivers of forest health and wildfire risk. These standards represent a long overdue update of the current system, as Ms. Patton mentioned. That said, the reviewers identified several opportunities to strengthen the program in the future. In particular, they emphasized the need to refine project performance metrics so TRPA can assess other ecosystem services such as old growth quality, biodiversity, and carbon sequestration. For consistency with other programs, both reviewers also encouraged TRPA to consider complementary metrics such as stand density indices. The reviewers highlighted the challenges related to the inevitable evolution of the remote sensing and modeling tools that are the basis for the new standards. So something we need to keep an eye on with respect to keeping track of technology and how those tools evolve. And finally, the reviewers noted the importance of investing in regular monitoring to support adaptive management in the face of climate change. Taken together, the peer review does support moving forward now while offering some guidance for future refinement. Putting on a different hat, I also want to mention that TRPA reached out to staff of the Governor's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force to ensure that the new standards align with statewide forest health and wildfire resilience priorities. There are obvious differences in scale, of course, but the Tahoe Basin efforts are consistent with and will contribute to the broader California forest management strategies. And this alignment, again, just reinforces the scientific credibility and the relevance of the proposed updates. So with that, I encourage the Commission to advance these proposed updates, and they set a strong foundation for moving forward, and I look forward to working with all of you, as well as TRPA staff in the future on additional updates. I'll also mention the previous item, there was discussion about the Science Council's involvement in housing and other things. I just want to stress to this committee and mention that the Council does continue to provide a peer review service and engage with not only TRPA, but other entities regarding opportunities to review environmental documents or other policies proposals and provide independent peer review. So we do have that opportunity and happy to engage where appropriate. So thank you very much for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Hi, Annabelle.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Annabelle Monty. I'm the program manager for the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team. And I just wanted to offer support this morning for these updates on these thresholds and give a huge shout out to the TRPA staff and others that worked on this. The collaboration and coordination that went into this happened at multiple scales, as you've already heard. And Mason and his team did multiple presentations to the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, as well as our multi-agency coordinating group, and really strove to engage those fire and forestry professionals in ensuring that these threshold updates were realistic, made sense on the ground, and integrated well with what was already happening. We've talked multiple times about how the science has needed to advance, and this is just an opportunity to reflect that and better reflect what is happening on the ground for those professionals that are implementing. And so huge thank you to actually talking to those people on the ground that are implementing these things to ensure that they make sense and that they are moving forward. There was a comment earlier about the flexibility that was built into this, and I wanted to draw attention to that as well. We all know that we are facing challenges that are happening at incredible rates. And so to be able to have the flexibility built into this threshold update to better reflect the needs on the ground to meet the challenges that people are dealing with is very much appreciated. So thank you for your time this morning, and the TFFT definitely supports these updates that have happened.
Thank you for that comment. Sorry, seeing no one else in the room, Catherine, I guess we can go online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. We'll close public comment on item 4D. We'll bring it back to the Commission. Any final thoughts before we go to a motion vote? Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Bashira. So I just want to call out and thank the MAC, the Basin Chiefs, and the TFFT people, because one of the great things they did in the last year was to hire Annabelle because she brings a level of expertise and the ability to synthesize what's talked about with the MAC and the TFFT into specifics that she could give to TRPA staff and others. And so thank you, Annabelle.
Agreed. Thank you, Steve. Final thoughts? Okay, we have two motions. We have the first motion on the screen there, if anyone would like to make it.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Garth.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the governing board approve the required findings, including a finding of no significant effect as shown in attachment A.
Thank you, Garth. Anyone want to second that motion? Thank you, Steve. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Tracy, we'll go to you, please.
Ms. Fiore Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, we have a second motion on the screen. Right about soon. You're doing two things at once. Now we have a second motion on the screen.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Please, Garth. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the governing board adopt ordinance 2026 TBD in attachment D to adopt the vegetation preservation environmental threshold carrying capacities as presented in attachment B.
Second.
Thank you, Garth, for the motion. Thank you, Steve, for the second. We'll come back to Tracy for a roll call vote.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Fiore Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, we are successful here, Mason. Good luck on your endeavors at the governing board. Thank you to you and Dan again. Okay, that closes our items for the day. We will move on to reports. This is item 5, and I'll be coming to Mr. Hester for the executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hester. As we always do, we'll start out with what the governing board has done with your previous recommendations. I think it's obvious that they accepted your recommendation to initiate the environmental impact statement process and the notice of preparation and to start the scoping, which you did today. So I don't need to update that other than to reiterate, Karen Fink asked me to reiterate that at the next meeting, we will be talking about the 6 topics that the Mountain Area Preservation Council brought up in their lawsuit that we settled. So we specifically said we would talk about those items in public forum. We have as part of the larger effort, but we want to be specific, have specific discussions on those with you. She also wanted to let you know that and let the public know that this week a new regional housing needs assessment will be released, which should provide a lot of good information for those discussions, the EIS and just in general. We had it done. The other item on your agenda next month at this time is the item that we pulled, item B. So that'll be on. The items that we have in the future are Tahoe Keys Marina has some code amendments they're proposing related to the height of buildings. And designation of certain streets in the regional transportation as arterials in the regional transportation plan. At some point, Mr. Segan will be returning with policies on transportation funding mechanisms and mobility mitigation fees. I don't know exactly what his schedule is on that. It's varies, but hopefully it won't be years. And if he's listening, I hope he enjoys that little dig. And that's all I have. If there are no questions, I'll turn off my mic and pass it to the young
Thanks,
man
John.
to my left.
Yeah, any questions for John?
The John, the 6 talking points that you were referring to from the map, is that part of a settlement agreement that you guys are required to bring those up and discuss them in a public forum?
Yeah, and I'll let Graham get into details on that since it was became a legal issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garth. Okay, I think we can come to you, Graham, for the legal counsel report.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just field that question from you, Mr. Alling. Yeah, that's right. The phase 2 housing amendments that TRPA adopted in December 2023 were the subject of a legal challenge. We reached a settlement agreement. As part of that agreement, we agreed through the phase 3, that's what we're calling it at the time, the phase 3, which became cultivating community. We would agree, as TRPA would agree, to have good faith discussions of these 6 items. For clarity, that settlement agreement doesn't say anything about having those discussions in any public forum. Staff believe that, through this year-long process, we have met that requirement already, that we've had those discussions through the working group. We've been considering those issues, whether it be internally or through the working group. Some of those items are indeed, in our perspective, part of the package that's being studied in the EIS. However, before last month's governing board meeting, we received a letter as a comment from MAP and their attorneys stating that we hadn't met that obligation. And so in response to that, we don't want to get into a debate over this or argue this. We're going to agendize that letter and put it on the APC meeting calendar for next month, so we can really go over and hear from staff what they heard during the working group process on those issues, what our perspective is on those issues today, and let the APC talk about it, and then see how that sort of plays out as we, what kind of input we get further, whether that is, part of the policy package going forward. You're welcome. Other than that, don't have any further legal updates this month.
Okay, thank you, Graham.
Mr. Chair, could I go back?
Please, John.
2 items looking for your direction on for future agendas. One is, as you may recall, Ms. Cyber offered to do a presentation on the forest plan. So I've talked with you individually about that, and we will schedule that when it looks like we have an agenda that won't take us into the afternoon. And the other item is, it's come up a number of times in your discussion on the housing, the stormwater proposal to look for new ways to allow more coverage, but address stormwater needs. As the commission knows, we adopted in phase 2 that you can put in a stormwater system if a public entity takes care of it. And that's already there and that's already happening. But we thought it might be good for your information and for the public's information if Shay Navarro and I actually came and did a presentation to you on that. We've already, for example, worked with Douglas County. Douglas County is creating a stormwater utility. There are several of those set up around the basin, and we're working with NCE, Mr. Drew's firm, on actually typical engineering level drawings for some of the facility plans they're doing. But we just thought maybe it'd be good if you would like to hear it, for us to come do a short presentation on how you go from here to having one of those systems approved and so forth.
Yeah, I'm hearing concurrence that we think that's a good idea. Both of those. So we would welcome that. Thank you, John. Okay. Thank you for those updates. APC members, it's our turn to provide any relevant updates that you would like to share with the group. We'd love to hear from you. I'll start in the room here to my left and go to Mr. Teixeira. Nothing, thank you. Garth?
Nothing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth. Mr. Hitchcock?
Let's see, the city recently received federal funding to assist in construction of the 3900 Lake Tahoe Boulevard Affordable Housing Project. Not quite fully funded yet, but it's one step in the right direction.
Congratulations. You also have a new interim city manager.
Yes, we do. Hillary Hodges will be stepping in once, I'm sorry, my mistake. Hillary Roverwood will be replacing, yes, Mr. Irvine when he leaves. And then last night, the city council, at much deliberation, did pass a motion to bring back our vacation home rental ordinance in March. We'll remove the 150-foot buffer and we'll set the cap at 900.
Wow. The ever evolving target of VHRs on the South Shore. Wow. Okay. A lot of thoughts there, but let's go online and I'm just gonna come down my list here randomly. So get ready and I'll go to Miss Cyber first.
There you go.
There you are.
Hi, everybody. I think folks, we talked about this previously, but I'll just bring it up again, and I'm going to put it in the chat here. I know that maybe not everybody in the room has access to this, and maybe it's something that it'll end up in the notes here. Hopefully, Tracy, you can put this link in there. I put a link to a map of the basin-wide trails decision, so the e-bikes decision that the Forest Service just signed. There's additional actions in that proposal other than e-bikes. But I wanted to just highlight a few things for this group. And I am soliciting your help in spreading the word related to these two things. So like I said, I put a link to the map in there. It's an online interactive GIS map that just actually has the decision and what everything was in it. But I wanted to start by saying, number one, this decision is signed, but that doesn't mean that anybody can just go ride e-bikes wherever they would like. So that doesn't mean that e-bikes are allowed on every trail here in the basin. It's just the ones that we designated in the project. And that map can help for folks that are interested in specific ones. Anybody who wants any, the links to the decision or anything like that, I can give you as well. But the e-bikes, essentially the steps that are going to happen here for implementing the e-bikes project is the Forest Service has a motor vehicle use map, the MVUM map, and that describes where people can operate motor vehicles. So it has all the forest roads and there are dates that they can be operated. So the e-bikes work the same way. It's just a different class of vehicle on that map. So Forest Service, we have to produce a new MVUM map. And when we get that produced, then essentially we're all covered for having the public informed of where they can and cannot go. And so then essentially that becomes those changes become activated once they get on the actual MVUM map. But there is a season of use as well for e-bikes. So it's April 1st to November 15th. So essentially, we have until April 1st to get our MVUM updated. That will come out, and then on April 1st is when those select trails, existing trails, will be designated as open to motor vehicles, or open to e-bikes. There were also some motorcycle trails in that project as well, and that project includes a couple new trailheads, and then the ability to do trail work and stuff like that. And I just wanted to see if there were any sort of, specific questions on that. But then again, help in spreading the word that number one, it's not all trails. There are specific e-bike trails. And then number two, that there is a season of use for these, and so similar to the way that the motorcycle and ATV trails work. And then we're continuing to work through our Caldor restoration planning effort. I mentioned we had a comment period for that project. Didn't get a whole lot of comments on that, and we're working through that. We're waiting on our return on our biological opinion from Fish and Wildlife Service before we can do any before we can get that decision signed. We're waiting on that consultation. So March, maybe early April, hoping to get a decision on Caldor project. And thanks, Robert, for that was the third thing that I should have highlighted, is that this is Class 1 e-bikes only. So what that means is a pedal assist e-bike. So if you're using a throttle, you're not on a Class 1 e-bike, or you're essentially not operating in the way that is described for a Class 1 e-bike. So that's kind of the easiest way. There is, the Class 1 and Class 3 e-bikes are very similar, because the Class 3 also does not have a throttle. So Class 1 does not have a throttle, it's pedal assist, but its maximum speed that the bike can get to while assisted is 20 miles an hour. Class 3 e-bikes are the same thing. They're pedal assist, and it can go up to 28 miles an hour. So that's a faster class of vehicle. And then the Class 2 are the ones that have a throttle, and you can operate without pedaling. So Class 1 e-bikes, pedal assist, are the only e-bikes that are approved under this project. Any other questions?
This is Graham St. Michelle, just General Counsel. I just want, Ms. Cyber, totally appreciate your report. Just a reminder to folks, if there are questions, let's just reach to Ms. Cyber directly, one-on-one. We're not agendized to have full discussions about things like this. If we want to put on agenda for a discussion, we can, but just to stick with open meeting law procedure, we just need to keep it to a report. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. And it sounds like we will have that discussion. So great. Thank you, Ashley. That's a big deal. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Crystal, let's go to you next.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one update, a reminder. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. Tomorrow night, we are holding a North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council meeting in Kings Beach at the North Tahoe Event Center, and we are going to be presenting on the 39 North redevelopment project in the town center of Kings Beach. They have redesigned the project, so this is the first kind of daylighting of that redesign. And so just wanted to touch on that. That's it for me.
Thank you, Crystal. Good luck at your meeting. Mr. Young?
Nothing for me today, but thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Have a good afternoon. Miss Stoller, we'll go to you next.
Nothing from me today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ellery. Let's see, my names are jumping around. Mr. McNamara, how about you?
No comment.
All right. Thank you, James. How about Miss Carr?
All righty. I don't want to steal Mary's thunder if she was going to mention it. But I got an email this morning from staff saying that the 2025 findings and recommendations memo for the Tahoe TMDL, the 2025 decision record memo, and the 2026 TMDL annual strategy have all been posted to the Lake Clarity tracker on the TMDL program management page. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Everyone head there now. I'll be looking at it. How about Chief Drennan?
Nothing to report from me, thanks.
Thank you, Chief. How about Miss Fiore Wagner?
Yeah, thanks for that announcement, Jennifer. Also, I wanted to share that we are actively recruiting for the backfill of Brian Judge. Many of you worked with him. He primarily oversaw TMDL implementation, worked closely with the municipalities on the implementation of the municipal stormwater permit and Caltrans. So hopefully by the next APC meeting, Ben or myself can announce that we have someone on board. And that's it.
Thanks, Mary. That's a big job. We'll be working closely with that person. And finally, how about Mr. Ehrlich?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, that leaves me. I'll just state we are planning to release the public review draft of our area plan, which is called the TED, friendly name of TED, the Tahoe El Dorado Area Plan. Will be released to the public. We're anticipating February 27th. We're then following with a series of public workshops, March 4th on the West Shore in Meeks Bay, March 11th in Myers, March 12th, a virtual workshop. And then we're planning to be before TRPA's Regional Planning Committee on March 25th for an informational item. That will also be our scoping meeting as we enter our EIR phase, just like we did today. And then we'll be, assuming all goes well, we'll be off and running shortly thereafter into our environmental process on that area plan. So we're pretty excited about all that. It's been a lot of work. I commend my staff and our consultant team for a lot of heavy lifting. So looking forward to that. And thank you all. That concludes item 5. Let's take us now to item 6. This is our last public interest comment period. Again, this is for members of the public wishing to address the Advisory Planning Commission. Please be advised we are prohibited from taking action on items not on our agenda. We'll first go to members of the public in the room who wish to make a comment. Then we'll go to members of the public who are joining us online via Zoom. Again, use the raised hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be unmuted and called upon by a TRPA staff member. And we will go to the room first. Seeing none, we will go online and Tracy will help us with that.
Mr. Chair, there are no hands raised online to make public comment.
Thank you, Tracy. We will close public comment and our last item is to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Steve. All right, we stand adjourned, 12:21. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the snow.
Thanks, you.